You're listening to Plane Crash, the book by Michael Diamond as retold to the kids of the Watertown SDA Church Junior Sabbath School. This is a story of one man's survival and God's faithful, miraculous rescuing power. Let's go.
The sun's rays continued to warm the air. Seemingly no longer moving, Mike's mind drifted to scenes of walking on Laguna beaches with Anne Louise. As Mike thought of Anne Louise, a different pain welled up inside him, not the physical pain from his injuries, but the agony of realizing what she must be going through. I wish I could let her know that I'm alive. From his new vantage point, he could see the layout of the canyon a lot better. The rugged walls looked as if they had been chiseled out by a giant hand. Sections of the canyon wall dropped straight down 600 feet to the bottom. Sloping sections, like he was on, gathered debris, small rocks, and dirt. Other parts of this canyon had deep crevasses where bushes grew. Mike could see the bottom of the canyon and a valley that was down lower than the canyon itself, and across the valley, a range of mountains. A sudden slippage of several feet yanked him back to reality. I'm still sliding, he realized, fear striking him like a lightning bolt. Another cliff? His heart raced. The second cliff was much bigger than the first. It protruded out and then cut back in sharply with a sheer drop of 35 to 40 feet. That's as high as a 4 or 5-story building. Mike rolled onto his stomach and dug the fingers of his right hand into the hard shale, but they could not get any hold. His left arm was useless. He pressed the side of his head into the earth and flattened his body against the steep slope as much as he could, but still he slid. Dirt and stones filled his mouth as he moved towards certain death. His legs went over the edge. He dug his fingers harder into the dirt, his upper legs, then his waist went over, then his complete left side. He felt his right hand pass over a small bush as he slid over the edge. He grabbed it. It stopped him momentarily, but he was dangling over the edge in thin air and hanging on with a broken arm. Mike tried to swing back up. No use. He peered over his right shoulder. I can't even see the bottom. He couldn't believe this was happening to him. He looked again and saw the bottom of the canyon, but it was so far down, a cluster of huge boulders and rocks. Lord, he prayed, I don't understand. You helped me through the plane crash, but what about this cliff? I could use a dramatic rescue, he thought. He couldn't hang on forever. In horror, he felt his fingers begin to slip and his grip give way. He closed his eyes. He couldn't bear to watch himself splatter the boulders below like a ripe melon. He plunged through the air, feeling it rush by him. But something interfered with his dive. He smashed into something, not the bottom, but a jagged rock protruding out from the face of the cliff. His right side slammed against it and broke a rib. It knocked the air out of him like a prize fighter thrown a right punch to the stomach. His lower jaw smacked the rock as he raced by, cracking several teeth. Again he dropped through empty air, and he landed on another ledge, feet first. His right leg and ankle snapped. He fell over on his left side. The ankle swelled rapidly. It felt like it was in a vice, with a sadistic giant turning the screw. I gotta get the boot off. He bent over and unfastened it. His other boot was already off. He saw it on the ground a few feet away from him. At least I'm alive, he thought, surprise surfacing through the throbbing pulse of pain in his ankle and leg. But the ground Mike had landed on was still covered with the small ball-bearing-like stones. And he was sliding again. As before, at times Mike thought he had stopped moving, but like the hour hand of a clock, although its movement may not be perceived, it does move, and so did Mike. He neared a third cliff. Because it was rounded and had no lip, Mike couldn't tell how much of a drop it would be. Fortunately, he fell only a few feet this time. But he landed on the same ankle that he had broken when he fell off the second cliff. Now the foot was totally twisted around and pointing behind him. Help me, Lord. Still he slid, breath by breath, toward a fourth cliff. Like the second, this was a sheer drop, but this time it would be a drop of 300 feet to the bottom of the canyon floor. He saw a tree near the path of his descent. I must get over to it, he told himself. It's my only chance. Lying on his back, Mike maneuvered himself so that his slide was in line with the tree, and it worked. He slid down to it and caught the trunk of the tree at his waist. At least I'm not going any further, he realized with relief. The sun was setting now. Mike had slid and fallen more than 300 feet. 20 feet from him was the final cliff with its 300-foot sheer drop to rocks and boulders. Mike was punchy. A crazy thought entered his head. I wonder if I still have my wallet. He reached behind him to check. Instead of his back pocket, he felt only bare flesh. The seat of his jeans was gone, torn and worn away by the sliding. When he pulled his hand back, he found it covered with blood. His exposed rear end was bleeding. Stones were embedded in his hips and thighs. His sweater was rolled up under his arms, leaving his torso bare. He was too weak to pull it back down. Blood flowed from scrapes and cuts all over his body. The warmth of the sun forsook him as he slipped below the mountains. Icy winds returned, even colder than the night before. An ominous thought flickered in his mind. You won't last the night. Chapter 10. Okay, thanks for checking. Bruce placed the receiver back in the cradle and sat with his chin propped in his hands. He turned to his wife. That was the last of them. San Luis Obispo. I checked all the airports down to Chambers refueling stop, all negative. Anything from Betty yet? No, even the Coast Guard has been alerted and nothing from them either. Bruce looked at his watch. 4 p.m. already. The phone rang. This is Santa Barbara County Sheriff Substation. We just received a call from a pilot reporting a faint emergency radio signal. Where? Bruce perked up. South of San Luis Obispo, near Big Pine Mountain. Thank you. Let me know if any more calls like that come in. Bruce dialed the Santa Barbara airport. We're looking for a down plane. Just got a report of an ELT signal around Big Pine Mountain. Can you alert commercial traffic in that area to monitor the emergency frequency? Will do, the controller responded. Thanks, Bruce said, already looking down at Betty's phone number for his next call. Betty, we got a distress signal south of Obispo. We need one of our planes up there right away. I'll get someone from Santa Barbara. Good, Bruce said. It could be Mike. But by the time the Santa Barbara pilot was ready to take off, thick fog had rolled in and grounded all the planes. Betty called Fresno to locate a pilot there. You won't be able to see much, Betty told the pilot, Leland Stout, but there's a signal to try to locate. Leland and his spotter took off. By the time they reached the area of the reported distress signal, it was shortly before midnight on Friday night. Betty was right. Can't see much up here, Leland commented. Well, maybe we'll hear something, the observer said. They flew the grid pattern patiently back and forth, then they carefully crisscrossed the area. It took hours, but they heard no distress signal. Doesn't sound like anyone's out there, Leland finally remarked. Let's give it one more pass and call it a night. Suddenly, a weak signal sounded on the radio. Beep! Did you hear that? The observer said. Sure did, Leland answered. Let's do another pass. They heard the bleep again. That's it! We found it! They radioed their coordinates back to Betty at the CAP search base station in San Jose. Wonder why the signal is so weak, the observer commented. The ELT had catapulted through Mike's windshield on impact. It broke half the windshield out, ricocheted off a large boulder in front of the plane, and then lodged under the left wing. More critically, the signal was coming out of a narrow canyon. The signal pattern was a strip only 6 miles long and 2 miles wide. It reached up only a few hundred feet, not nearly high enough to be picked up by commercial airplanes flying way overhead. Under better conditions, an ELT can give off a signal with a 50-mile radius. I guess that's all we can do now, Leland said. He seemed reluctant to leave. Hey, how about turning on our landing lights as a signal? The spotter suggested. If there's a survivor down there, it could encourage him. Good idea, Leland responded. Let's do it. He made one more pass with their lights on, then flew away into the blackness of the night. But Mike did not see the landing lights.
You've been listening to Plane Crash by Michael Diamond. If you're enjoying the story so far, tune in for the next chapter. And meanwhile, you can visit my YouTube channel where you'll find stories like these. Bible stories, mission stories, as well as Bible and history skits for kids and adults. See you next time.